Hello, BookTube. We are apparently doing a chapter-by-chapter read-along of Lord of the Rings on this channel. I sort of fell into it by accident. I was happy to be involved in a read-along of The Two Towers with David Wiley and Tony from An Erudite Adventure, and now I'm reading every chapter of Lord of the Rings. I'm doing a video on every chapter of Lord of the Rings, and I'm going to wrap around when I'm done with Return of the King. I'm going to wrap around to the Fellowship of the Ring. Why not? Why not? Why not just the whole thing? So that down the line, if somebody wants to, they can just do a playlist of every one of these videos. I would never have thought to do it on my own, but I don't want to stop. I am having a blast. So we're just going to continue with our read along. We're in the Return of the King now. So we have left the action of the Hobbit Frodo, who is bearing the One Ring of Power, imbued with all the strength of Sauron, the Dark Lord of Mordor, the Lord of the Rings. So Frodo and his servant Sam, accompanied by the creature Gollum, are bearing that ring in secret to Mordor, to Sauron's stronghold, in order to somehow get it past his defenses, get it all the way to Mount Doom, and destroy it in the molten flames of Mount Doom, where Sauron originally created it. The only thing on Middle-earth that can destroy it. We are widely given to understand that even Dragonfire could not destroy the One Ring. It's almost hopeless quest, but there's no other way for it. The powers that be in Middle-earth, the powers that be at the Council of Elrond have decided that it is not good enough to hide the ring or to throw it out into the sea or something like that. That's not good enough because someone could find it. Instead, they want this madcap quest to destroy it. Now, Gandalf says a couple of times in Lord of the Rings that it should be their duty to destroy this evil once and for all, not just to take care of it for the immediate future. I'm not sure that the people of Middle-earth would agree with him. If Sauron gets the ring, everyone becomes a slave, and all the lords and captains of the free peoples of the earth are dead. But everyone becomes a slave. All the ordinary people, every rick and cottage, they all become slaves to Sauron in a miserable existence that we have seen. We've seen examples of what it's like. It's a miserable existence, and it would only be strengthened if he had the ring. His servants are already miserable. And a long time ago, at the end of the Second Age, the ring is cut from Sauron's finger. And through a quick series of events, it falls into the Anduin River, the big river that runs through the middle of Middle-earth. And it doesn't roll down to the sea, as Saruman tells the White Council. He suggests that it has. He's hoping that it hasn't, but he suggests that it has. Instead, it falls into the mud of the Anduin, not far from where it fell into the Anduin. And it's there for thousands of years. A gigantic, yawning gap of time in which there is no real danger of that ring being found. It's found by pure chance. It's lost again by pure chance. It is inactive for a very, very long time, decades, and is only found again by pure chance. Gandalf can say, he can tell Bilbo or Frodo that the ring is trying to find its master, but it can't walk. It's very limited. It goes a long time with Sauron merely being a growing terrestrial power, a military power. The danger, we are told over and over again, by him regaining the One Ring, is not terrestrial, it's supernatural. It would mean an end. It would mean a night without a dawn. It would mean a complete darkness. It would mean slavery. Everyone would become a ring wraith. And that's the risk you're running if you send people, the original Fellowship, or even just a couple of hobbits, into Mordor, right under Sauron's nose. You run the risk that he will gain the ring. Whereas, if you were to put it, let's say the dwarfs of Gimli's folk made a cask of indestructible mithril and sealed it, put the ring inside the cask, seal the cask, in ways known only to the dwarfs. So it is essentially unopenable. Mithril is indestructible, and let's say the sealing is incredibly complicated and unopenable. Think of the door in the Fellowship of the Ring. Speak, friend, and enter. Nothing can open it other than that dwarvish mechanism. If the dwarves made a cask like that for the One Ring, they put the One Ring inside it, and they seal it with arts known only to them, and then you give that cask to Gwaihir the Wind Lord, a gigantic eagle, and you tell him, fly as far west as you can. Fly until you have only enough energy to turn around and come back. When you get to that point, drop this into the ocean. Weighs 100 pounds. It's going to go straight to the bottom of the ocean. Who knows how deep the oceans are in Middle-earth. And then you turn around and fly back. No one has seen you do that. Sauron is not watching the coast with any kind of with that kind of degree of specificity. And if he is, his spies can be distracted by other eagles. That would get rid of the ring for basically forever. There's no way that Sauron would ever find that. There's no mechanism that he would have. Anyway, far be it from me to argue with the Council of Elrond. That is the goal that Frodo and Sam are on, and we dealt with them a lot in the Two Towers. But we have now come back to the other side of the peril. The two prongs of the peril that Sauron represents for Middle-earth are supernatural and natural, military. Because in addition to being the Lord of the Rings and, a supernatural being from across the ocean, Sauron is also a terrestrial power, a land aggressor, who is making war on the great kingdom of men, Gondor, that is right near the border of his own Mordor. It was a two-pronged war because the kingdom of Rohan was also fighting the evil wizard Saruman, but that has been dealt with. Through a series of strokes of luck, the good guys have managed to defeat the army that Saruman created and to defeat Saruman. So all the attention can now be turned to Gondor. And the attention of the narrative turns to Gondor as well. We leave Frodo and Sam in the high passes of the mountains near Mordor, and we come back to the west. We come back to our cast of heroes. There's the other two hobbits, Merry and Pippin. There's the wizard Gandalf, who is reborn and renewed with greater power. There's Aragorn, who is the heir to the kingdom of Gondor. He's the heir to the guy that originally cut the ring from Sauron's finger. There's Gimli the dwarf, Legolas the elf, the riders of Rohan, these valiant plainsmen, these valiant quasi-Viking figures that are, we've seen them in battle, we know that they mean business. And we have seen that group, this group of heroes has been alarmed. Sauron's forces are moving on the west. The time for dithering or councils is over. The hammer blow is about to fall on Gondor. Gondor is going to need help. And Theoden, the king of Rohan, they are allies of Gondor. Theoden absolutely wants to help, but he needs to muster his forces. He only has the forces that he could grab at his disposal to ride out in the Two Towers. Now he needs to muster his kingdom, a formal muster of arms. That's going to take a little time. But when our good guys defeat the evil wizard Saruman, one of the things they get from that defeat, unbeknownst to Saruman, he wouldn't have delivered it, but it is thrown down from the Tower of Orthanc, is a polished globe called a palantir. It's an ancient artifact from the old kingdom of Numenor, the old race of men, giant, incredibly competent supermen, from the lost kingdom of Numenor. Aragorn, one of our main characters in this part of the book, is a direct descendant of those characters. He is a direct descendant of Numenor. And the palantir that is thrown out of the Tower of Orthanc, we quickly are given to read, probably caused a lot of trouble for the evil wizard Saruman. He probably thought that he could master the stone, because the palantir is one of 7 stones that can talk to each other over great distances if they're in the right hands, wielded by the right people. And maybe unbeknownst to Saruman at first, the guy who's in control of one of the only other stones available is Sauron himself in Mordor. And whether Saruman knows it or not, his will is probably co-opted by Sauron at first. He's still able to think independently because he's playing his own game against Sauron. But it's a very dangerous thing to use this stone. It shows you only what Sauron wants you to see, unless you have the strength of will, the supernatural ability, to pull it away from him and direct it to your own uses. We don't know for sure to what extent Saruman had that ability, but Pippin, the little hobbit who picks it up, certainly doesn't have that ability at all. He is amazing in that he has the endurance to be questioned by Sauron and not reveal anything substantial. But still, the stone is quickly taken away from him, and he is quickly taken away from the stone. Gandalf takes Pippin with him to ride fast as the wind on Shadowfax to Gondor. Far, far faster than an army can march. And the stone he turns over to Aragorn, whose property it is. Aragorn tartly reminds Gimli in the chapter that we're reading today, The Passing of the Grey Company. He says to him that you forget who you're talking to. The stone is mine. I'm not worried about I might be worried about the danger of looking into it, but I have the right to do so. We don't know for sure how much braggadocio that is until this chapter, because a few things happen in this chapter. We're with our group of heroes and the Rohirrim, and they are marching, and they know that the war is on the land now. There's no way to avoid it. And they know something of the urgency because Gandalf has already illustrated that because he's rushed off to the aid of Gondor. But they're thinking that they probably have time to await the muster of the forces of Rohan and proceed to Gondor in a proper procedural military fashion in order to render concentrated military aid. And while they're going about doing that, they realize, some outriders of their group realize that they are being followed by a group of men on horseback. And they're naturally wondering, if you're reading this for the first time, you're wondering if maybe this is a trick. Maybe Saruman had an ace up his sleeve. Maybe Sauron has agents in the land. Maybe Theoden's group, they have a good group of people here, but they're not numberless. If they were met with a force in number, they might have serious trouble. But it turns out to be the least expected thing of all. It turns out to be Aragorn's kinsmen, the rest of the Dunedain, who are also descendants of Númenor. They are the last holdouts of this ancient race of men, who aren't like other men. They have a great deal of far sight. They have a great deal of wisdom, a great deal of technical ability. They live longer, a lot longer than normal human beings do. We're actually told Gimli is drawing a comparison between the two. The Rangers, these other Dunedain who come to offer their help for Aragorn, are perfectly courteous. They're perfectly nice to the Rohirrim. There's no animosity here. They're not trying to one-up anybody. They want to ride along because they want to help their kinsmen. They have received mystical word that Aragorn needs them. But they hold themselves apart. They don't talk much. They don't share a mess. They don't sing songs or anything like that. And Gimli notices that. So he gives us a really good glimpse of what they're like. They are a strange company, these newcomers, Gimli said. Stout men and lordly they are, and the riders of Rohan look almost like boys beside them. Only a dwarf could say something like that. For they are grim men of face, worn with weathered rocks for the most part, even as Aragorn himself, and they are silent. And Legolas has to remind him, but even as Aragorn, they are courteous if they break their silence. And along with the Dunedain have also come the sons of Elrond, the great elven master of Rivendell. His twin sons have come along as well because they want to see what combat is like. Get more than their share. And Gimli and Legolas are talking about these additions to their group. Theoden says, if you Dunedain are anything like Aragorn, then I don't care about how many of you are. I am incredibly enriched in number. And they probably are. We don't learn much about them, a lot less than I would like. We don't, for instance, see a lot of what they're like in combat. But you definitely believe it. Because they are some of the last flickers of Westerness that we see. They're some of the last flickers, and some of those last flickers aren't good. We've already met King Denethor, or Steward Denethor in Gondor, who is also a last remaining flicker of what those old and incredibly formidable men could be like. But when Gimli and Legolas are looking at these additions, the twin sons of Elrond and also the Dunedain, Gimli, they sort of raise the possibility of other help. Let's see here. The question is raised of whether or not other help could have come, and one part of that question is more elves from Mirkwood, more elves from the Woodland Realm, more of Legolas's own people. And he looks away. Legolas stood before the gate and turned his bright eyes away north and east, and his fair face was troubled. And he said, I do not think that any would come, he answered. They have no need to ride to war. War already marches on their own lands. Which is a reference, the only reference that we get until we get to the appendices at the end of this book, that Legolas' father, King Thranduil, is encountering. Sauron is moving against all of the West. He's not moving just against Gondor. There's a major battle under the trees that we never see. Tolkien never narrates it. We never get the story of it. We just hear about it in an appendix. Sounds epic. It'd be a great book. It'd be a great Tolkien book if anybody in our lifetime gets the rights to write such a thing. But the Dunedain come along and they join our party for a while, and they eventually go home with Theoden, where two things happen. One is that Aragorn decides to use the Palantir. It's his. He believes he has the right to do it, whether Sauron is formidable or not, and we'll get to that. The other thing that happens is that he has this famous conversation with Éowyn, who is Theoden's niece, and she is a shield maiden of Rohan, but she is largely being given a custodial role of the people, and she doesn't want it. She doesn't want a custodial role. She wants to go to war. She wants to accompany Aragorn when he goes on his grand mission, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And they have a great conversation that is it's done well in Peter Jackson's movies, but I love the conversation even better between the two of them, where she says to him, may I not now spend my life as I will? And he says, few may do that with honor. But as for you, lady, did you not accept the charge to govern the people until their lord's return? And if you had not been chosen, then some marshal or captain would have been set in the same place, and he could not ride away from his charge, were he weary of it or not. Shall I always be chosen? She said bitterly. Shall I always be left behind when riders depart, to mind the house while they win renown, to find food and beds when they return? A time may come soon, he said, when none will return. Then there will be need of valor without renown, for none shall remember the deeds that are done in the last defense of your homes. Yet the deeds will not be the less valiant because they are unpraised. And she answered, all your words are but to say, you are a woman, and your part is in the house. But when the men have died in battle and honor, you have leave to be burned in the house, for the men will need it no more. But I am of the house of Earl, and not a serving woman. I can ride and wield blade, and I do not fear either pain or death. What do you fear, lady? He asked. A cage, she said, to stay behind bars until use and old age accept them, and all chance of doing great deeds is gone beyond recall or desire. And yet you counseled me not to adventure on the road that I had chosen, because it is perilous. It's a great exchange. And it shows that Tolkien's 21st century critics, who have not read him but see fit to correct and improve him, have not any idea that he was aware of these things. He was perfectly aware of these things. Éowyn is perfectly aware of what we would now call sexism, a double standard. She's perfectly aware of that. She doesn't like it. There's actually no one better suited to do the role that she's doing right now, to safeguard her people. She would just be one other warrior if she went off with Aragorn or anybody else. She's not comforted by that at all. She wants to win renown with her blade. And Tolkien knows that. He's not saying she's unfit. Obviously he's not, since we all know, anybody who's read the book knows, she's going to get her wish. She's going to get her wish, very much so. It's wonderfully done, and the dangerous path that she is talking about is something that Aragorn learns when he uses the Palantir. He is able not only to show himself to Sauron, who was not aware until this point that Isildur's heir was alive and working against him. A grown, formidable man working against him. We can guess that Sauron might have known that line was continuing, but he does not know until that moment that Isildur's heir is alive and well and hale and formidable. He certainly doesn't know that Isildur's heir has a Palantir. He has no idea that has happened at Orthanc. He thinks the Palantir is still safely in Saruman's charge. He doesn't know he's been betrayed, and we don't know at this moment that he knows that Saruman has fallen. Or anything about the Ents. We don't know that he knows anything about that. Every last single orc that could have told him died. And Saruman lost his ability to tell Sauron at a great distance when Wormtongue throws the Palantir out of Orthanc. So it could be that Sauron just doesn't know. So in that moment, not only does Aragorn show himself to Sauron, and he tells Gimli and Legolas that he shows himself to Sauron in a different guise than what you see now. Very interesting. What is that guise? Does he mean it literally? Does he wear the crown of Gondor? Or does he mean that that there's a different self to him, a different way, a different even energy aura, if you want to put it that way? We don't really know, but he certainly doesn't show himself as a grubby ranger because it gets Sauron's attention in a huge way. It gets his attention because not only does Aragorn show himself to Sauron in the Palantir and let him know this isn't Saruman's anymore, he also shows that it's mine by wresting control of it away from Sauron. It's a minor thing. Aragorn says it and passes over it, and it clearly leaves him weakened. But it's a major, major thing for a character to be able to do. He wrests control of the stone from Sauron. Now, partly we're told that he might have done that because it's actually his. It belongs to him. But it's also partially because he is definitely singular. It's unlikely, for instance, we're told all the time that Aragorn is the son of Arathorn. I doubt that Arathorn, whoever he is, could have wrested a stone of Orthanc from the control of Sauron. I doubt that very much. I think we are meant to think all along that the line of Elendil, which has genetic peaks and bottoms, has hit a peak with Aragorn at exactly the time when it needed to do so. That we get a great person from that line right when we need one. And when Aragorn wrests control of the stone from Sauron, he's able to see a lot. Stones tell you a lot. They don't just show you things. They tell you a lot of information. And he learns a lot, including that Sauron has planned a gigantic blow to fall on Gondor in very little time, far faster than can be answered by the muster of Rohan. Rohan is an actual kingdom. It needs to muster its armed forces. This blow is going to strike an unsuspecting Gondor before that can happen. Aragorn has to get to Gondor faster than that. And there is a path. There is a way. Those of you who've seen the movies will definitely remember this sequence, and this also relies on the ancient world and older prophecies, Isildur and Elendil, Aragorn's ancient ancestors from centuries ago. It relies on them as well. There was a group of men who refused to fight against Sauron. They were ensorcelled by him. They were maybe even suborned by him. They maybe liked him. They refused to fight against him, and Isildur curses them that they will remain undead, ghostly undead beings, until their oath is fulfilled. They swore an oath to the King of Gondor, not to Sauron. And they exist in a pass in the mountains that is an almost direct route between where Aragorn is and where Aragorn needs to be, where Gondor. Everyone in this chapter that hears this plan thinks it's lunacy. People who go into the Pass of the Dead die. They don't come out the other end. They're never seen again. But Aragorn's not just anybody. These men, these ghosts, this ghostly army owes him their allegiance. They owe their allegiance to Gondor. He is Gondor. He is the heir of Gondor. He is not certain at all, but it's his only gamble. It's the only thing that he can do, is to go that route. So he does. And he calls out to the dead when he's in their stronghold and tells them what's what. Now, this is a rare example. There are some where Peter Jackson's dramatization in his movie is much more effective than the version in the book. In the book, we get a moment that we don't, I think, get in the movie. I don't think it's even there in the extended version, where when our heroes are riding away from that stronghold, Legolas looks back and says, well, I see the rest of our party, but there's a lot more. The dead are following. And that's really effective, but it's not as effective as what Peter Jackson does. Peter Jackson makes it not only creepy, but really rousing. The scene where Aragorn manages to convince the dead to march with him is wonderfully done in the movie, just wonderfully done. It's great in the movie. It's also great in the extended cut. I don't remember off the top of my head. I know that Lord of the Rings, the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings has come back to, I think, Netflix. I don't remember which it is. I think it might be the theatrical releases, but you won't be losing anything by that. But that's how this chapter ends. Passing of the Grey Company refers to our characters who have to get to this stronghold, this stone that will call the dead. They have to get there. They have to do a lot of hard riding of their own. It's only the strength of will of Aragorn himself that keeps them going. It's only the Dunedain who could make that ride. The other people who are along who are not Dunedain are strained almost to the breaking point. This is a task beyond normal men. That's the passing of the Grey Company, but there's also a neat little double fork there because the dead are also a Grey Company, and that's how the chapter ends. A little bit ambiguously, a little bit up in the air. Aragorn has succeeded. He has walked the path of the dead. That still leaves Gondor ahead. That still leaves all the action now converging on Gondor. There's Aragorn. There's the army of the dead. There's the forces of Rohan, who will eventually be making their way to Gondor. There's Gondor itself. There's this hammer blow of a sudden strike that Sauron has orchestrated, all converging on Gondor. Uh, and we will get to that because we're going to continue chapter at a time. So we're going to move on tomorrow to the muster of Rohan. So once again, the action here is being split. The action was split anyway because we've left Frodo and Sam. But even here in the West, even here with our non-Hobbit heroes, there is still action in many different places. There's Gandalf and Pippin who are in Gondor with Denethor, and there's now Aragorn has left with a handful of people and Legolas and Gimli, but there's also Rohan itself, which is mustering and getting ready for war. We're just going to follow all around those as we continue with Return of the King. So I'll continue this tomorrow or the next time I get a chance. And we'll just go on chapter by chapter. I'm having a blast. So one thing that I noticed about this chapter that I really like, that these read-throughs of these chapters are getting me thinking about this thing that I've read so many times. One thing that I've noticed about this chapter that isn't, it is just sort of a given, I think, in Tolkien. I don't think he really examines it much. And maybe didn't even think about it that much. It's definitely present, though, which is that the men in this story, at least the descendants of Númenor, have supernatural ability as well as natural ability. They aren't just taller and stronger and live longer. Isildur is a man, but he's able to curse a group of people, and he isn't just saying, oh, you'll get yours. His curse actually works. It keeps a whole group of people in ghost-like non-life for centuries. Where does that power come from? Why does Isildur have that ability? Why does he have that superpower? Aragorn the same way. That he not only is able to break that curse, but also the fact that the Seeing Stones come from Númenor and therefore are technically his property shouldn't give him the... He engages in this supernatural contest of wills with a being who isn't human, and he wins. I like that. I guess maybe the continuity freak in me would like it if Tolkien had fleshed it out at all, but I still like it. This older group of humans, these Númenorians, have abilities that extend just a little into the unseen world, in addition to all the stuff they can do in the present day. I like that. That's interesting. That plays a part in a couple of different points in the chapters that are coming up. But we're just going to keep going. We're going to keep going with Return of the King. So I will put this up, and then as soon as I can get to the next chapter, I will. Thank you, BookTube.